Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us. For those who have been with us since this morning, and those that have just joined for this session, a big welcome to all of you. This is a session on the centrality of child protection in a changing humanitarian landscape. We are here at a time of enormous complexity and transformation, both in the crisis that we are responding to and in the system through which we are trying to respond. The goal of today's session is to take stock, to reflect on where the child protection and humanitarian action sector stands today, what are the threats and what are the opportunities to it, and recap a bit on the efforts that we have been making to help kind of this transition to be slightly more smooth for the sector. In terms of the scale of the crisis, we all know that we are dealing with an unprecedented time within humanitarian space. 2024 saw the highest number of grave violations against children ever verified by the UN. Tens of thousands of children, including were verified, including recruitment, abduction, sexual violence, and attacks on schools and hospitals. We have all heard that 1 in 6 children worldwide are living or fleeing conflict. We know that displacement is at historic high levels. 43 million children globally are forcibly displaced. These numbers are not just statistics. They are a signal that our system of protection is under enormous strain and that children are often the first to suffer and the one that is not being really seen. Meanwhile, the nature of crisis is evolving as well. Conflicts are more protracted, climate emergencies are accelerating, and international humanitarian space is shrinking both globally and in many specific contexts. In this environment, child protection is under pressure, not just from the outside, but from within the humanitarian architecture itself. We'll hear today from Ron specifically on this element of the humanitarian architecture, and also another session on Wednesday. The child protection and humanitarian action, as we know from the unprotected reports, continues to be underfunded, even before this crisis started. There's an increasing risk that child protection will be deprioritized as humanitarian budgets are cut and operations become more narrowly focused on life-saving assistance. But we know that the evidence shows that protection is life-saving. It's just life-saving in a slightly different way than health and nutrition is. If children are not protected, their nutrition, education, health are not going to be able to maximize their impact. While the times seem rather grim, there are opportunities. What are those opportunities, and how can we capitalize on them to make sure that we as a community can continue the protection of children across humanitarian contexts? How do we utilize digital solutions that offer fresh ways to reach and support children in even the most hard-to-reach places? How do we create more space for local and community actors to do what they do best, protect their children? These are some questions that we'll be reflecting on during this session. How we prioritize, fund, and organize child protection says everything about the kind of humanitarian system we want and the kind of world we believe children deserve. In this session, we will look honestly at the challenges and discuss how the Alliance is attempting to support the sector in addressing them. With that, I would like to hand over to Elspeth Chapman, who will be sharing some of the results of a recent survey that the Alliance conducted on the impact of the current crisis on the protection of children. Over to you, Elspeth.
Great. Thank you so much, Hani. And great. Thanks, Pedro. So yes, as Hani said, I'm Elspeth from the Alliance Secretariat team, and I'm going to share a very brief global snapshot of what we've heard is happening to child protection in humanitarian settings due to the rapid and quite major funding cuts. So this was based upon a rapid data gathering exercise that we conducted in March and April this year. We heard from 250 child protection practitioners across 55 countries, nearly half from local and national NGOs. The online survey was also complemented by data, evidence, and interviews with 5 child protection agencies, giving us both qualitative and quantitative data alongside examples, case studies, and just some really interesting insights. So we did this exercise to provide us and you and our wider membership an initial insights into the impact, but also to provide a tool for us to use when engaging with humanitarian leadership and decision makers. So before I move to the next slide to highlight very briefly the main findings, I also just want to say a huge thanks to, I'm sure, many of you on this call and your colleagues and beyond who actually responded to this survey. We received a lot of input very quickly. And beyond that, we also found that people, especially these days, are so open to share and exchange. So it was really, despite the very depressing content and findings, it was still a great exercise in kind of collaboration and the strength of this community. So moving to the next slide, I'm just going to quickly highlight the key findings. So the first finding, and most importantly, children are being directly and severely impacted. So in March, 5 agencies said already they've had to stop services to over 1 million children, and we know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Services like case management, alternative care, psychosocial support have been suspended. The consequences are already being seen as immediate and devastating. We heard of children being left detained without legal support, facing child marriage, sexual exploitation, or risking suicide or so-called honor killings. In Iraq and DRC, we heard about reintegration programs for former children associated with armed groups and forces closing down, and already reports of children rejoining armed groups. In Ethiopia and Bangladesh, we heard that case management services have been stopped at scale across multiple districts, leaving children, the most vulnerable children, without support and protection. And this is just what's visible now. We heard from many of you that the deeper, longer term impacts are still unfolding. And perhaps the highest impacts immediately were seen in programs like case management, but there's also concern that some of the more preventive programming, the true extent of the impacts are to be seen and can ultimately lead to an increase in the need for remedial action for which we have less resources. Secondly, child protection is being hit hard at every level of the humanitarian response. So we heard that 80% of respondents have said the cuts have severely affected children's protection, especially at national and local levels. But we heard that it's local and national NGOs suffering the most. Over half report losing more than 40% of their child protection budgets. And the findings of a much larger OCHA survey, which was recently released, had very similar findings. International agencies are also seeing major losses, some reporting losing up to a third of their global child protection portfolios, with major concerns, of course, about pipeline funding. Thirdly, and this we explored in depth in a previous session this morning, the child protection workforce is under immense and mounting strain. 70% of organizations have cut frontline staff, over 60% have lost training and technical capacity. And one NGO, for example, told us they had to terminate more than 200 staff out of a 500 strong team. And another had to shrink by nearly 80% in one country. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, with further restructures and cuts underway. And we're already seeing the impacts on children. We heard from organizations in Ukraine that caseworkers can no longer visit families. And in Colombia, despite increases in child recruitment, there are few child protection workers and services to respond. And finally, we heard that systems that monitor grave violations against children in conflict are also losing critical funding and are unable to conduct the monitoring that's required for this important work. And finally, the last result I wanted to share with you is it's not just about cuts to child protection. Many of you explained in quite a lot of detail how cuts across all sectors, across education, across health, across nutrition, across water and sanitation, are compounding children's protection risks. So when an education, food security, or WASH program shuts down, it immediately heightens risk factors for children and their families. And then on top of this, we heard that some amazing examples of integrated programming. So, for example, integrated nutrition and child protection programs across Yemen, Burkina Faso, Niger, integrated child protection and education in Afghanistan have abruptly ended, which really compounds child protection risks. And one of these in particular was really to generate important learning for the sector on integrated approaches, which is a huge loss. So as you can see, the results are very stark, and I'm sure many of you can resonate with these findings in your context within your organizations. You can find the full results in our briefing note. And I think for now, I'll hand over to our next speaker, Ron Pouwels, the Global Child Protection Area of Responsibility Coordinator, to provide an overview of the humanitarian reset. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And yes, it's very sad to see the consequences of all the funding constraints, and to particularly see what's happening on the ground and how it affects children and their families, who are really at the receiving end of all this. What I would like to do is to take us through something that many of you are aware of, but may not necessarily know all the pieces, because there are quite a few pieces to it, which is the humanitarian reset, and how that is actually also having an impact on child protection in combination with the funding cuts. So maybe the next slide, which has been provided courtesy to OCHA, which is basically the humanitarian reset in a nutshell, or also known as the ERC's 10-point plan. We had an earlier session, and very relevant to this annual meeting is the people-centered approach. That is the local level, the participation and increase of an acceleration also of our localization work. So ensuring that also responses, but also coordination is more locally or nationally led. The second point is at country level, the work that was also known as a reprioritization. So sort of just to take a step back, the humanitarian reset, of course, was triggered by first of all the U.S. Stop work orders, but it's not only the U.S. that is cutting its humanitarian funding. There are many other countries that are making shifts in terms of where they spend their money. And I think the UK has been the most honest and brutal in saying we are going to spend the money on defense instead of on development aid, at least the part that we will be cutting. So that triggered all this, and as a result, also we had, as you know, been going through the usual humanitarian program cycle in the second half of 2024, and all of a sudden we had to our colleagues at the field level, at the country level, had to reprioritize everything. This was largely delegated to HCs, and again here this is an area where we also immediately felt the impact of on child protection. We received many emails, calls, messages from our coordinators at the country level, saying that they are fighting to retain protection, because prioritizing came also with the message of life-saving. Priority to be given to life-saving issues, and that was by some old-fashioned interpretations of it, was seen as, okay, we should be focusing on WASH, nutrition, health, and food security. So we've been in touch as a result of the messages. We contacted OCHA because sometimes messages were also shared from at country level by OCHA in terms of the reprioritization and the focus on life saving, which would exclude protection. We managed in a number of countries to rectify the initial shift towards health, nutrition, WASH, and food security, and thanks to our coordinators and our partners at the field level to do so. The third part was basically the EDGs building on those HC's analysis to further prioritize actions, and where they also looked at potential deactivation of clusters in certain countries. They had initially indicated a bit more of a radical approach when the earlier discussions were happening around a humanitarian reset, but of the countries they are proposing right now, 3 countries still have a cluster approach, which are Colombia, Cameroon, and Northeast Nigeria. So those are the countries that have been proposed for deactivation of the cluster. That of course has an impact on child protection in the sense that we have to shift towards a more sectoral approach of coordinating child protection. And the intention, I think, is also to continue to look at assessing the countries where a cluster approach is active and see how that can be further reduced, or have countries where there are less clusters activated. There is also work that's happening around reform and reimagine, which is related to advising on how we can further look at creative solutions to address the humanitarian response, and is largely drawing on evaluations that have been done of the humanitarian system. There's also a strand of work that looks at empowering in-country leadership, looking at also reducing inefficiencies, duplications, bureaucracy. It's a work that's largely led by a former HC in Ukraine. And it's really building on what the ERC has been trying to do with also with the prioritization, is giving more authority or strengthen the authority or re-emphasize the authority of HCs. That also means, in terms of child protection, that we need to try to see how we can influence HCs, or also getting HCs groomed, or senior staff groomed to become HCs that have a child protection background. Because so far, what we are seeing is very much an approach that is averse to child protection and protection more generally. The 9th part is the work that is related to simplifying clusters, and I'll come back to that a bit later. And then there's a look at the ISC structural review, to look at how many YASC bodies are there. Do we need all those? Do we need an OPAC? Do we need a YASC deputy meeting? Why should ISC principals meet twice a year? Is there other ways to do that? So it's looking at that. And then there's some other strands that are looking at how can we change the mindset to focus on what we do best, looking also at pooled resources and how we ensure that a larger part of the pooled resources are going to local and national actors, and to continue to ramp up and strengthen our advocacy and communication. And of course, all of that is also linked to some of the work, UN 80 work streams that are also looking at efficiencies and improvements of the way we work, looking at a review of the implementation of mandates, and a whole UN system-wide strategic review and realignment. Next slide, please. So a lot of strands of work. So what's sort of the impact that we've already seen, apart from what Elspeth just mentioned? On the reprioritization, we are seeing that the people in need are still, of course, 226 million, as came out of all the HNRPs. The people targeted was reduced from 139.5 million to 95.8 million, and the requirements reduced from $34 billion to $21 billion. That's the latest info we have from the HPC steering group. So a significant reduction in the numbers of people that we are targeting, and also a reduced budget. We also know from particularly looking at the US funding cuts, and this is based on a survey that OCHA did, that the national NGOs have been hardest hit among humanitarian partners. They constitute the majority of the partners that have been impacted by, as per the survey respondents. And also 41% of respondents reported that they are suspending partnerships with local actors. Next slide. On protection, of course, sectoral data are a bit difficult to analyze given the limitations of the data that OCHA was collecting. But we know that there are several trends emerging. One is that protection, and particularly GBV, have been significantly defunded. The housing, land, and property are seeing a termination of US funding of 81%, child protection 75, GBV 73, protection 62, and mine action only 38. There was an exception, but GBV respondents reported the highest net loss of all protection components, with over $61 million in US funding terminated. Next slide, please. On coordination staffing, we did a quick survey among our staff, and this is only at the end of March, but that will be a different picture, I'm afraid, by the summer. But the capacities will be limited in it's at least 11 contexts: Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, Colombia, DRC, Haiti, Northeast Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, and Venezuela. State of Palestine, they actually have strengthened capacities, and we hope that stays like this. Basically, the US aid funding freeze has directly and negatively impacted on at least half of the context with CPAR coordination teams. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the EDG plans, there were 8 countries where we look at where it says sort of considered for a transition. Now we know Iraq, Libya were already had already transitioned, so it's basically limited to Cameroon, Colombia, and Nigeria. But as I said, there could be other countries following this. And then on cluster simplification, this is still the recommendation as it was in the previous version of the OPAC co-chair. So the cluster simplification strand was handed to the OPEC co-chairs of UNICEF and Save the Children to lead the work on it. For the child protection area of responsibility, the recommendation is that the protection cluster and the protection AORs and work streams are to be consolidated in one cluster. The latest version, which I will discuss and present on a bit more tomorrow, is that this is actually not changed. It's slightly differently worded, but the protection cluster will, the AORs, all AORs will cease to exist and will continue forward as one consolidated protection cluster. But that we'll have a further discussion on that tomorrow. So a lot is happening. All these strands should come together sort of towards mid of June, as the ISC principals will be meeting then. And then we should get a different and a more concise and hopefully a complete picture of where all this is leading us to. But there will be a lot of changes. We will also hopefully hear by then when all these changes will come into effect. But in addition to what Elspeth mentioned, it will definitely have an impact on how we work as child protection in humanitarian action. Thank you for listening, and happy to deal with any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron, for this overview of the different pieces of the humanitarian reset. For the sake of time, I'm just going to jump quickly onto presenting the strategic note that the Alliance has developed. Just to recap of why we developed this strategic note, it is directly in response to the request from our steering committee that basically the Alliance, given the current crisis, should refocus all its work on supporting the sector to hopefully weather this crisis that we are in a bit more smoothly, which is basically our role as an alliance. So we came up with a strategic note that for this year, basically until April next year, is going to replace our regular strategy. It's almost our emergency strategy. And it comprises of 3 priorities. The first priority, if you can go to the next slide, basically talks about leading and supporting evidence-informed advocacy that places children and their protection at the center of humanitarian action. So many of you have been part of these efforts already. These efforts have basically started from late January into February, when the initial wave of the budget cuts started by the American government, and then the subsequent changes and the humanitarian reset. So there are 2 specific objectives on there. The first one focuses on making sure that key agencies and alliance members and donors are supported in basically advocating for child protection. And the second objective is focused very much on building more of an evidence base to be able to support our advocacy work going forward. If you can go to the second priority, please. The second priority focuses on providing technical leadership and supporting quality programming within the sector. As you all know, that's a key component of the work of the Alliance by producing technical resources, learning and development material, and support. The Alliance supports practitioners in the field to deliver high-quality child protection services. There are 3 objectives under this priority. One is quality child protection focused technical products are relevant to the emerging context and landscape, and they meet the needs of diverse practitioners. The second one is focused on learning. As we have heard this morning, for those of you who are there, one of the things that, and also when Elspeth presented, one of the things that seems to be cut as the first line of defense when budgets start diminishing is the element of learning. So our membership very strongly and specifically highlighted the need for more learning opportunities. And then the third element is actual technical support directly to those that are delivering services. It's something that typically is done through the CPAR. Now, with the changes that Ron just outlined, we'll have to see how this can be continued to be provided for the sake of the sector. Next slide, please. The third priority is basically a broader priority on ensuring that we are able to continue collectively innovating and tackling challenges that this year is going to undoubtedly bring to the sector. It has two objectives under it. One is very much focused on supporting child protection, local child protection systems and actors, which is very much related to the theme of this year's annual meeting. And the second one has a focus on working with across sectors and with other sectors to deliver protection of children, but also to enable space for discussions on strategic issues that will emerge in this crisis. As I mentioned, I tried to be very brief on this one. This is what is going to inform the focus of the Alliance in the next year. And we are going to move into just after this to a panel that will focus on some of our key members and contributors to the Alliance, telling us about how this strategy is relevant to them and the work that they're doing in the field, so that we can see how it is, whether or not it is grounded in reality, and so that its implementation is also informed. With that, I'll hand over to Camilla, who's going to help us moderate the panel. Over to you, Camilla.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Hani, Ron, Elspeth, for setting the scene and sharing so much rich information about where we're at, where we're going. We're now going to hear from some of the most highly engaged Alliance members from a range of contexts and entities on the effect the current context is having on their work and how this strategic brief can support them and how relevant they see it to their work. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. And then we'll hear from them before we wrap up. So we have Wafa Tayeb, who is a passionate safeguarding specialist at ABS Development Organization for Women and Children. She has extensive experience in project coordination and advocacy. She's held key leadership roles in operations, HR, safeguarding, and she's driven systemic change and ethical compliance. Not easy work. She's also an advocate for women's empowerment in Yemen, where she's based. Wafa is one of 5 Alliance champions. Established in 1996, ABS Development Organization is a women-led NGO in Yemen, and it's dedicated to advancing both humanitarian and development efforts with a focus on protection, women's empowerment, and community resilience. And they work across sectors as well, which I think is very relevant for our conversation today. And ABS Development Organization operates in 7 offices across Yemen, covering all governorates. So really strong national organization to have with us today. So Wafa, thank you for making the time. I'll come to you in a minute for your remarks, but I'll now introduce the other speakers. But I'm so pleased you could connect with us today. We'll move next to Michael Byamukama. I actually didn't have a chance to check the pronunciation of your second name in the check we had earlier because we had so many other things on, so please forgive me if I've got it wrong. Michael's a transformative leader with more than 25 years of experience in child protection, again in both humanitarian and development. He's reviewed and contributed to regional, global and national policy documents, frameworks, strategies and standards on social services, social protection, mental health and psychosocial support. He's the REPSI Uganda Country Director and recent President of Uganda's National Association of Social Workers, and he's a current steering committee member of the Global Social Services Workforce Alliance, as well as one of our own steering committee members. So a really seasoned advocate for child protection systems, a practitioner, and a leader. So welcome, Michael. Next up is Gurvinder Singh, who has worked for the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement for 25 years. He is the IFRC's Senior Advisor for Child Protection, Participation and Safeguarding. Big job. Gurvinder partners with local Red Cross and Red Crescent societies to strengthen early warning and anticipatory action and response programming to protect and assist children in conflict, disasters and climate crisis. So this preparedness focus seems to be pretty crucial right now with everything, with crises increasing and funding reducing. Gurvinder is also a member of the Alliance Steering Committee. And finally, we have Steve Miller, who is a transformational leader with over 15 years of experience at the senior executive level. In his career, he's demonstrated consistent dedication to child rights and global partnerships. Steve currently serves as the Global Director of Child Protection, Equality and Gender Justice at Save the Children, and he is a member of the Alliance Steering Committee as well, and until recently a member of our ExCom, so we really benefited from his expertise there as well, so thanks for that. Okay, so I'm going to hand to each speaker in turn, but just to recap, we're inviting them to speak about the effect of the current context that Elspeth and Ron have framed on their work or in their context, and how they see relevance for this for their work within our strategic brief. So I'll start with Wafa. We'll go to ladies first. Over to you. And if you could just remember to unmute yourself, Wafa, and we'll hear your voice.
Sorry.
No.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wafa. I am a safeguarding specialist in ADO, which is HABS organization for women and child. I work in Yemen. Firstly, I have only two priorities to talk about. The first one is how the current context is affecting our work, whether the funding crisis or humanitarian reset. I think here in Yemen, today is this question is really related to what we are doing. So we are operating in the front line in Yemen. The country is severely impacted by the crippling funding crisis and the shifting in the humanitarian landscape. The current situation in Yemen is presenting us with the dual-edged challenge. On one hand, the funding crisis with its sharp and sudden cuts has critically stunned our capacity to deliver essential life-saving services. We are talking about distribution to malnutrition treatment, healthcare services, and protection for the most vulnerable. This forces us to operate with extremely scarce resources, constantly recalibrating our priorities to meet escalated immediate needs. On the other hand, while the humanitarian reset brings opportunities for local driven and innovative intervention, it also places additional pressure on us to rapidly adapt to new accountability frameworks and increase reported requirements, all at a time when our resources are dwindling and our capacity are eroding daily. The challenges facing local NGOs in Yemen are immense. Funding cuts don't just mean escalating back projects. They mean a collapse in our ability to save lives. Entire communities, especially in remote and conflict-affected areas, face severe interruptions in basic services like food, water, shelter, and protection. This isn't just data, it's the ground reality for children, women, and vulnerable groups every single day. Our staff, who are the heart of our humanitarian work, are bearing increased workload, facing job insecurities, and enduring immense psychological pressure as they witness deteriorating conditions without adequate resources to intervene. What we see on the ground is the funding cuts don't just threaten projects, they directly threaten people's lives and undermine the resilience of the communities we serve. I hope this highlights the critical importance of genuine and sustainable support for local organizations.
Thank you, Wafa.
Thank
Thanks very
you.
much for setting the scene, and that's not an easy situation to be working in.
Yes.
Did you want to say any more about the strategic brief and its relevance for your work, or are you done? I don't want
Yes.
to cut you short if you had any more to say. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Okay, I have only thing, just like statements that I read the strategic actually. The strategy was good for me to read, and for us is not only the alliance strategy brief isn't just a document for us. It mirrors our daily fight to protect children and in amidst crisis and change. Actually, the relevance that we found of the strategic brief to us, like NGO in Yemen, the brief problem statement, the strain on the system and its capacity to protect children is our stake reality in Yemen. Abrupt aid cuts have crippled essential services from nutrition to protection, leaving children actually vulnerable. Our ability to meet child protection minimum standards is severely compromised. This humanitarian receipt, while offering opportunity for local-driven solution, is also bringing new demands on local NGOs like ours, who are already operating with critically stretched resources. Therefore, the brief of the strategic priority are vital. The evidence-informed advocacy, the priority number one, is crucial. We live with the impact of these cuts and can provide the strike evidence needed to argue for children's centrality. And the technically leadership for quality, the priority number two, is essential to prevent the erosion of the standards as skilled staff are lost. And the investing in local actors and systems, the priority number three, is the key to any sustainable solution in this new landscape. And how we can support the strategic brief and call to action, despite immense challenges from operational capacity to staff well-being, as I mentioned earlier, local NGOs in Yemen are committed to this vision. We can active support the strategy brief by I made points like providing frontline evidence, sharing real-time data and case studies from women to strengthen advocacy for child protection funding. And the second, sharing practical insights, offering our on-the-ground experience to ensure technical guidance and that is relevant and adaptable for local contexts, and championing localization, actively participating in reforms and genuinely transfer power and resources to local actors who understand the needs best. The children in Yemen and of Yemen are facing dire consequences due to the surface disruptions, increased malnutrition and loss of safe spaces, and the heightened risks of exploitation. For this strategic brief to truly make a difference, the international community must prioritize direct, flexible funding and genuine partnership with local organizations. We are on the front line. Empower us to protect our children.
Thanks,
The
Wafa.
challenge, just one
No,
moment.
please carry on.
Okay. The challenges are immense, I know, but so it's our resolve. The Alliance brief efforts roadmap. Let's work together to ensure children are not just an afterthought, but central to every humanitarian action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership. I want to give you a round of applause, and I'm sure if we were in the room with you together, we would do so. I mean, you've been working extra even before this current crisis, but including during it with our two other Arabic-speaking champions. They were trying to pull together a pre-meeting for Arabic-speaking members of the Alliance to sort of mobilise them ahead of this meeting, considering the lack of interpretation. And they're still planning to have a post-meeting event to kind of debrief. So, you know, really you're really taking your role as champion seriously. And I think a lot of your suggestions and offers will be taken up following the meeting. So thank you so much, Wafa. Okay, without further ado, I'll hand to Michael. Michael, let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Camilla. And Byamukama Michael is my name. Of course, I could see the spelling disturbing a bit. And the rep
I
says
knew it wasn't
regional
right. Thank you.
On the other slide, there was Byamukaka, but I'm Byamukama Michael, and I work with the REPS Regional Psychosocial Support Initiative, the country director for Uganda. REPS, of course, operates in 13 countries in Eastern and Eastern and Southern Africa, and then including Somalia, Sudan. Of course, listening in, the brief provides us with a clear way forward in this unpredictable environment, where the funding line is really unpredictable in terms of cutting and in terms of increasing percentages, like the way Lonnie presented it. Of course, we need to know that every percentage, every number, there is a life behind that number. Whether it's 1 or 2, there is life. And of course, when it comes to children, it means the more the number, whether 2 or 3, there is vulnerability levels. And of course, in humanitarian, the cutting of affected us and the way we operate, and then in terms of handling case management, protection, and others, and other interventions, especially us, considering that we look at mainstreaming mental health and psychological support across all sectors, across the nexus of that is both humanitarian and involvement. So looking at the strategic brief, I think to me, it is structure that would guide and is going to be helpful looking at the way we work. Because when the cutting came in, we lost the staff. It was abrupt. And of course, the vis-a-vis increasing caseload in terms of our interventions. And therefore, the way to do this, I think, being a member of the Alliance and being part of this process, especially looking at the briefer, when I look at the priority number 2, that is objective 1, looking at the leader. I think to me, in terms of Alliance, continuing to the presence online in supporting members is key for us. It will help us to continue moving forward, and also co-creating with us national and local organizations in terms of generating evidence, and also in terms of capacity building online. Because to me, when you look at the strategic brief, it brings out those key elements that is going to be helpful for us. especially in terms of coordination and in terms of continuous, product sharing, using even social media and social based platforms like the Kaya. I think few in the morning session we talked about Kaya generating all those information, and then the webinars that would continue facilitation because the brief clearly brings out that despite the cutting in funding, the alliance is not walking away from continuous providing leadership in this area and facilitating and supporting members to be able to continue despite the funding cutting, especially to facilitate that process of learning, capacity building, and also the element of accountability is key. Of course, looking at leadership and also looking at integrating, I know the briefer talks about also integrating AI, which is very key, especially considering that as reps, when I look at the who have been operating here in Uganda, I've been using a lot of, working closely with many volunteers and having staff to carry forward the case management processes and also strengthening the referral pathways. I think to me, the briefer clearly brings out that the alliance is not abandoning the members, but bringing out key components that would continue facilitating members and also helping them to do what they are doing. So it's very, very full and focused. And that's what I can say considering this. That of course, also in terms of generating evidence and also continuous development of developing materials, I think to me, it's very key. That is a sign of also showing us that there will be continuous leadership guidance and also working together in terms of partnership, in terms of enabling us as national agencies to reach out and serve better the communities we serve. Of course, I can share experience. The briefer we have talked about, I know the localization is also one of the areas, but looking at the past experience, even before the cutting, there was already the hiccup in terms of stress, because under localization, you would see the national agency, yes, transferring, they want national NGOs to do much with more, but of course, without considering the overheads, of course. I think that is another area that we need to look into, so that as we transfer, as we co-create, as we work together as partners, as we strengthen coordination in terms of are we transferring more of a burden, or we are facilitating the process in terms of quality work we offer and we do for the children. Of course, there is an increased crisis. I look at Uganda, currently I think we have more than 1.868006 refugees, and the numbers keep on flowing. It's a crisis every day, from Sudan, from DRC, from Eritrea, and from Southern Sudan. They keep on flowing. And at the end of the day, we know that even most of these children are unaccompanied minors. They come in, the big number is women and children, and they constitute more than 80%. Children constitute 55%. I think, to me, the brief strategic direction is timely, and this is something that will keep the alliance active, and also bringing the members together as we chatter and swim across this terrain, or this environment is full of waves and But I think it will keep us
Certainly,
together
yeah.
as members. I think it's an assurance. Yeah, thanks. Up to you, Camille. Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Yes, it certainly seems to be bringing us together. And I really hear your points. It's definitely easier to do quality work when you're well resourced. So yeah, we can heed that call as part of digesting, with the help of AI, all of the conversations this week. We have two final speakers, so I want to give them time. I'm going to hand straight to Gurvinder. So over to you, Gurvinder.
Thanks, Camilla, and thanks to everyone for this. And it really is a difficult time. The sector for child protection was already receiving pennies, and there's been reports from the Alliance and others about counting pennies. And so we see even from that baseline, we're being further reduced. And of course, that's translating into children being less safe. They're having less access to service, and we are going to see a widening gap of which children get access and which ones don't. We see this clearly in large disasters and emergencies like Gaza, in DRC, in Sudan, in Yemen, and in others around the world. But also, as the IFRC, we'd really emphasize those small and medium disasters that don't always get the headlines, that don't get attention, those very localized ones because of the heat wave, the drought, the flood, that are going to see these repercussions. Already low funding, even further. And this will further undermine the trust in this work that we were already losing as humanitarian sector, and it will be reinforced. So very concerning. However, with the Alliance, and it's really excellent briefing, and congratulations to the team, and thank you to the team always for their excellent work. We know that part of the solution is evidence-based advocacy. We need to show our value, that what we're doing, the work that we're doing with children is having an impact. And the more we can come together, all of us here on this call and at this annual meeting, to show that and to do it in a coordinated, more effective way is very helpful. And the other area of the briefing around programming, you know, really the minimum standards, finding ways as a collective, as a network dedicated to these issues, how do we keep those alive? Because they're very much under threat when we lose the funding. But we know these are the minimum standards. And so how do we work together to continue to generate action from those? And then in terms of innovating and finding practical solutions, very much agree with this as a focus area. We know we need to find more efficiencies in every dollar we spend, in every child we reach. How can we do this more effectively? And a lot of this comes to localized action, as is really well emphasized in the briefing note. How do we accelerate localized action? And we have been talking about this for years, but we really need to do it. Are the decisions the most local? So when we talk about early warning and response, we know we need to have that led locally by volunteers who are closest to the emergency, and that includes decision making and it includes the funding. And so whether we're a large agency or small one, how do we ensure and advocate that that money is funneled to those people closest to the emergency? And maybe that's an area we haven't always been strong enough as a collective, and that's a muscle we really have to develop. Because localized action, again, just like child protection, has been getting pennies, and so it needs to be increased. Second is, how do we accelerate our localized preventative action, especially in early warning and anticipatory action, so that we're taking action before the emergency happens itself. And when an emergency does occur, the burden is less on those communities and on children. And how do we accelerate our localized partnerships so that child protection, mental health, education, community engagement, all of these things are not seen so much as separate? And as a sector, we've been doing work. I know the Alliance has been doing great work with these different sectors, including education, to bridge that gap. But how do we now accelerate that action so all of us really pick it up and implement it. And finally, just one other reflection from the briefing note. How do we accelerate localized trust? We know that communities have been losing trust in the humanitarian sector for various reasons, but how can we listen better and take what communities are telling us, including children, of course, and really translate that into action that meets local needs with the funding, with the resources that we have available. And so really trying to find a collective effort to localize, make that action as close to the emergency, and sometimes meaning that each of us have to take on different roles than we've been used to, but putting those local volunteers at the front and supporting them. Perhaps I'll stop there. Thanks.
No problem. I know that some people will be doing a little bit of prep for the next session, but I think we can still keep the rest of you for 5 minutes to hear from Steve, who's definitely not last. He's last but not least by any means. So over to you, Steve.
That's okay. Thanks, Camilla. I'm going to dispense with my notes. I know we're at time. I want to respect that. I am going to write a piece and hopefully put it up on the website as well, sort of reflecting on the strategic note. So that will come then. But just to sort of emphasize a couple of points that my colleagues have raised, you know, Save the Children is a proud founding member of the Alliance, and we remain fully committed. We've spoken about the current sector-wide crisis, but I've certainly felt, like a lot of our colleagues have expressed, this surge of solidarity, renewed willingness to work together across agencies. And I do think we are entering, despite the evidence right in front of us right now, an era of deeper collaboration, from strategic integration to shared services to bold collective action. So Save the Children, our organization, like many of yours, we're downsizing and we're restructuring. And many of us will have fewer global technical specialists to draw on, at least in the short term. And that makes partnerships like the Alliance essential, not optional, for common tools, guidance, and expertise. The Alliance's role as a platform for collective reflection and innovation is vital for us to adapt to this new reality. And the strategy note, which is brilliant, by the way, it calls for us to keep children and their protection central. At Save the Children, that's exactly what we're doing. We're responding in the moment by sharpening our focus on our core work, advancing the rights and well-being of children, and we're restructuring our organization around what we call our 3 breakthroughs, one of which is child protection focused as a clear strategic priority. Our humanitarian and development functions are now unified to support more coherent, agile, and streamlined ways of working. And in this moment, it's so important that we continue investing in both prevention and response, in addressing root causes, system strengthening, and in accountability. So just finally, we built something powerful together here in the Alliance. That goes without saying. I think everyone around the table today agrees that it's not just technical, it's principled, it's effective, and it's grounded in evidence. We know what works. We have the minimum standards. Let's draw on them, build on them, and keep moving forward together. Camilla, back to you.
Great work, Steve. Even without notes, it was very powerful, and we're really grateful for your commitment. Without further ado, I'm going to hand back to Hani to close this out. I know he had a few final points to make. Thanks very much to all the panelists.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, the words of the panelists was so powerful that I feel like my words will, in comparison, will fade away. So I will just suffice to say thank you for all the amazing reflections. We're discussing with colleagues in the background of, like, many of what you said can just become quotes that can go straight on our website, because it was so encouraging to us and so right on point in terms of how the strategy can actually support this transition phase that we are in as a sector. I just want to invite everyone to, as you go on your break, unfortunately we only had a 15-minute break, which now has cut down to 10. Also take this Menti that my colleague Kira just shared. It is basically, we wanted to ask similar questions that we asked to the panel, to all of you guys, to hear what your thoughts are on on the strategic note, whether you find it of relevance to you and to your work. And then there are a couple of other questions. We don't have to stay here for it. You can continue responding to it. We will keep the results on the screen, but please feel free, once you have responded, to go take a little break and come back for the next session that will start 15 minutes after the hour. Thank you very much, and thank you, Camilla, for moderating, and Elspeth and Ron for the inputs.